Limitations of dimensional analysis. First limitation is using dimensional analysis we cannot find the exact value of the constant. Now we have seen that how to establish the relation between the different physical properties using dimensional analysis. For example, T, L and G, where T is the time period, L is the length and G is the acceleration due to gravity. We have established the relationship between them assuming that T is proportional to L raised to A and proportional to G raised to B. Then we considered that T is proportional to L raised to A and G raised to B. Then we calculated the value of A and B, but nowhere we could calculate the constant of proportionality, that T equal to K L raised to A and G raised to B. We cannot find this value of K using dimensional analysis. Now to calculate the value of constant of proportionality, we have to go for experimental results only. So this is the first limitation of dimensional analysis. Limitation number 2. Dimensional analysis cannot be used in order to derive the relations involving the dimensionless quantities such as trigonometric functions, exponential functions and logarithmic functions, because dimensional analysis is concerned only with those physical quantities which have got valid dimensions. It cannot deal with those quantities or those functions which are dimensionless. Now for example, in the law of magnetic induction, due to a current carrying wire, dB is equal to mu 0 upon 4 pi I dl sine theta upon r square. Now here using dimensional analysis we cannot predict the existence of sine theta because sine theta is a dimensionless quantity. So this is limitation number 2 of dimensional analysis. Limitation number 3. The method of dimensional analysis is not useful if the constant of proportionality is not a dimensionless quantity. For example, universal constant of gravitation. Now regarding the Newton's law of gravitation, force of gravitation is given by G m1 m2 divided by r square. Here G is not a dimensionless constant, but its unit are Newton meter square per kilogram square. And since G has got its own dimensions, by taking the proportionality as F proportional to m1 m2 divided by r square, we cannot correctly calculate the relation between F, m1 m2 and r square. So this is limitation number 3, that this method does not work if the constant of proportionality is not dimensionless. Limitation number 4. If the equation contains 2 or more terms having same dimensions, then it becomes very difficult to establish the relationship between them. For example, in the relation V is equal to U plus AT, the dimensions of U and AT are same. AT, acceleration multiplied by time. The dimensions of U, velocity, are L raised to 1, T raised to minus 1. Now let us find the dimensions of AT. A, acceleration. Dimensions of acceleration are L raised to 1, T raised to minus 2. Multiplied by time, T raised to 1. Now T raised to minus 2 into T raised to 1 is minus 2 plus 1, T raised to minus 1. So L1 T raised to minus 2. So now since there are two terms U and AT having same dimensions, we cannot establish the correct relation, that we cannot predict that V is equal to U plus AT in this case using dimensional analysis. So this is limitation number 4, that the dimensional analysis is not useful if the equation contains 2 or more terms having same dimensions. Next topic is accuracy, precision and uncertainty in the measurements. In physics, we need to measure different quantities. We may need to measure length, mass, time, temperature, current, any physical quantity we may need to measure. Now the accuracy of measurement depends upon two main factors. First is mistake and second is error. Let us first talk about the mistakes. Mistakes can be 100% unavoidable. We can eliminate the mistake 100%. But errors cannot be eliminated 100%. We cannot eliminate 100%. There is always more or little error in the measurement of the given physical quantity. But yes, mistakes we can eliminate 100%. Now why do the mistakes are caused in the measurement of a physical quantity? Number 1, the reason for causing mistakes is faulty instrument. The instrument taken for the measurement may be faulty. So because of this, there might be a mistake or error or inaccuracy in the measurement or the reading taken. Reason number 2, lack of skill. The experimenter who is performing the measurements or taking the observations may not know the exact way to operate the given instrument. For example, if a student does not know how to take readings using vernier calipers, he is bound to make mistakes while taking the readings. Number 3, incorrect method or lack of knowledge. For example, if you are taking the reading of meniscus, that is water level in glass tube, then in that case, what we have to do, we got to see two levels, upper one and lower one. If the experimenter didn't know which level is to be considered for the measurements, then that may cause inaccuracy to the reading. In case of water in glass tube, we always have to take the lowest level reading. And in case of mercury in the glass tube, we have always to take the topmost reading. So this is the correct way to take the reading. If the experimenter doesn't know this, then he is bound to create a certain mistake. Number 4, ambient conditions. Ambient condition refers to the temperature, pressure, wind current at the time of performing the experiment. If they are not correct at the time of performing the experiment, then that may lead to uncertainty in the readings taken. Now, in order to have a correct reading, more accurate reading, what we have to do is, first thing, we have to select correct instrument and accurate instrument. Second, the experimenter should be trained. He should have a proper skill to take the measurement. Number 3, a proper method should be used to take the readings. And number 4, ambient conditions must be adjusted according to the need of the experiment. So these are the requirements to eliminate mistakes. Quality instrument, skill of the person doing the experiment. Number 3, the method used for the measurement should be accurate. And number 4, adjusting the external or internal factors affecting the result of the experiment, which is also known as experimental setup. Now let us discuss errors. Errors are caused by faulty measurements. Now, as we have discussed it earlier only, errors cannot be eliminated 100%. But what we can do is, we can minimize the error. Okay, let us first categorize these errors into different types. Number 1, systematic error. Systematic error is a consistent repeatable error which is caused due to faulty instrument or imperfect method of observation. Now, the faulty instrument may have a wrong calibration. Now, what is calibration? The markings of the scale are known as calibration. For example, if you consider a meter scale, suppose this is the meter scale, this is known as calibration. These lines are known as calibration. Suppose if the distance between these divisions is not perfect, inaccurate, then it is known as wrong calibration. Now suppose there is one division less, that is 1 millimeter less. So while we are measuring 10 centimeter, we are actually measuring 10 centimeter minus 1 millimeter. Every time we'll use this scale, we are going to make an error of minus 1 millimeter. Two types of errors are there. Positive error, if you are measuring more than expected value, it is called as positive error. And if you are measuring less than the expected value, it is called as negative error. So this is due to wrong calibration, systematic error. And remember, systematic errors are consistently repeatable. That is, they are repeatable in every reading. Every time you will use the instrument, the error will be introduced. And this is known as systematic error. First, instrumental error. Now, as we have discussed it just now, instrumental error is mostly because of wrong calibration. Now, what is the wrong calibration? Now, consider the scale of an ammeter. Suppose this is the scale of ammeter. It reads from 0 ampere. This is 0 ampere. This is 1 ampere. This is 2 ampere. Then goes on up to 10 ampere. Suppose the pointer does not rest over here when no current is flowing, but it rests somewhere over here. That is, the pointer is reading 0.5 ampere when there is no current in the instrument. So this error has been caused even before starting the experiment, and there is an error of plus 0.5 ampere. Suppose a current of 2 ampere is passing through the instrument, then the instrument will give a reading of 2.5 ampere. So every time you will use this instrument, there will be an error of 0.5 ampere. So this is known as instrumental error. The next type of systematic error is error due to imperfections in experimental techniques. This type of errors mostly occur due to wrong setup. For example, if you are taking reading of rise of water column in a glass tube, and if the glass tube is not held vertical, but it is held inclined to the vertical, then it is going to give a wrong reading. The glass should be held exactly vertical in this case. Then and then only we are going to get correct readings. Now this type of errors are due to imperfections in experimental techniques. Number 3. Personal error. Such errors are introduced due to a specific experimenter, that is observer. So these errors are observer specific. They are introduced due to bias of the observer, carelessness of the observer in taking the right observations or right readings. Okay. Now for example, while we are taking a reading of meter scale, while we are measuring something using meter scale, the line of sight should be exactly perpendicular to the scale. If the line of sight changes, then there are maximum chances that the reading may change or reading may be inaccurate. So these may vary person to person, that a particular person may not have a proper eyesight, so he will cause or he will introduce error in every reading he is going to take. So these errors are known as personal errors, which are very person specific. Now even if I am observing the time in watch, suppose the minute hand is at 12 o'clock. So if you are not observing directly above it, if you are observing somewhere from the left hand side, you may appear the hand to be little past 12. And if you are observing it from right hand side, then you will find the pointer little before 12. So this error is introduced not because of the instrument but because of the person not looking exactly above the minute hand. So this is very person specific error known as personal error. Next type of errors are random errors. Random errors occur due to change in the ambient conditions. Now what are ambient conditions? Ambient conditions are surrounding conditions like temperature, pressure, humidity, etc. Wind current also we can consider over here. So due to change in these conditions, suppose there is a drastic change in temperature while performing the experiment, then that may cause certain error in the readings taken. So pressure also plays a vital role, humidity also plays a role sometimes. So these errors cannot be eliminated 100%. But yes, we can try to minimize these errors. So now in order to minimize errors, systematic errors and random errors, what we do, we always go for a set of readings and to find average value. So average value always helps to minimize the errors introduced in the given reading. More is the set, less are the errors introduced in the reading. Now let us take an example. Suppose we are calculating the time period of a simple pendulum. So when simple pendulum starts from point A, goes to point B and returns back from A to B and B to A. This is called as its time period. Now to measure this time period, if we are using a stopwatch, then when the ball will start from point A, we are going to press the stopwatch. It takes certain time to press the stopwatch. Then again when we will go to the B and return back to A, we are going to stop the stopwatch. Now to start and stop the stopwatch, it takes certain time. So if T is the time, then T minus delta T or plus delta T. This plus delta T is the error introduced. This is to start and stop the watch. If we are taking one reading, let us say 10 seconds is the time period of the simple pendulum and the error introduced is 2 seconds. So we are introducing an error of 2 seconds over 10 seconds, a considerable error. But instead of doing so, if we take a reading of 100 oscillations, then the same error will be introduced over 100 multiplied by 10 seconds. So 100 multiplied by 10 seconds is equal to 1000 seconds. So 1000 plus or minus 2. See what a drastic reduction in the error is. For one reading, we are introducing an error of 2 seconds for 10 seconds, and for 100 readings we are introducing it for plus or minus 2 seconds over 1000 seconds. So this way, by increasing the number of sets, we can minimize the error. So we always insist to go for mean value or average value so that the error might be reduced. Now the estimation of errors. As discussed just now, in order to minimize the error, what we do is we take a number of readings, a large set of readings that we take. Suppose for a particular observation we are taking n number of readings. First reading is A1, second reading A2, third reading A3, nth reading AN. Then we find the mean value. So A mean is sum of all readings divided by number of readings. Say this is the sum of all readings A1 plus A2 plus A3 up to AN divided by the number of readings. This is also given as A mean is equal to 1 upon N sigma AI, where I goes from 1 to N. So this I will be replaced by 1, 2, 3, 4 and sigma stands for sum, that is addition. So put I equal to 1, A1 plus, then I equal to 2, A2 plus, I equal to 3, A3 likewise. So this is the mean value, and mean value is supposed to be the most accurate value or most expected value or most probable value, you can say. So the most accurate value is mean value for the given observation. Now absolute error. Now we know that the mean value is given as A mean is equal to sum of all the readings A1 plus A2 plus A3 up to the last reading AN divided by the total number, that is N. Now let us estimate the error. Now to find the error, absolute error in the every reading, it is calculated as absolute error in reading number 1 is equal to the modulus of mean value minus first reading A1. Similarly, we can find the absolute error in the second reading delta A2 is equal to the mean value minus second reading. So on, absolute error in the third reading is equal to A mean minus third reading, and so we can this way find all the absolute errors up to the absolute error in the reading AN is equal to A mean minus AN. Now using these all absolute errors, we can find the value of mean absolute error. Mean absolute error, also known as average absolute error. Therefore, delta A mean is equal to, now we have to take the average of all absolute errors. Now how to take average? Add all these errors, delta A1 plus delta A2 plus delta A3 up to delta AN divided by the total number, and the total number is N. So this is how we find mean absolute error or average absolute error. Once we find the mean absolute error, then the measurement of the quantity can be given as A is equal to A mean plus or minus delta A mean. Now plus or minus stands for positive error or negative error. The error may be more than the mean or it may be less than the mean, and therefore the value of A, the expected value, may lie anywhere between the two extreme values A mean plus delta A mean and A mean minus delta A mean. So the expected value of the given observation may lie anywhere between these two extreme values A mean plus delta A mean. Here we are taking the error to be positive, and A mean minus delta A mean. Here the error is considered to be negative. Now let us find out the relative error. Relative error is defined as the ratio of mean absolute error to its arithmetic mean value. And therefore we can write that as delta A mean, which is mean absolute error, divided by A mean, which is most probable value. So this is known as the relative error in the given observation. So this is the relative error in the observation of A. Relative error when multiplied by 100 gives us the percentage error. So percentage error is defined as relative error multiplied by 100, and therefore we can write its formula as delta A mean, that is mean absolute error, divided by the mean value or the average value multiplied by 100. Now this is 100 multiplied by 100. So this gives us the percentage error in the measurement of given reading. Over here the reading of A. Next topic is combination of errors. Now before going for combination of errors, let us consider an example. Area of a square. Now to find the area of square, we have to measure only one quantity, that is length of the square. Now in order to have more accurate reading, we will measure this length n number of times, and then what we are going to find is L mean. Okay, so this is the most probable value. Now we know L mean is equal to L1 plus L2 up to Ln divided by n. Then we find the absolute errors, and from that we are going to find delta L mean, that is mean absolute error, right? And then we get the most expected reading as L mean plus or minus delta L mean. Okay, now this is for measurement of only one quantity, but sometimes the given physical quantity involves the combination of two or more quantities. Suppose we want to find the area of a rectangle, or let us find the perimeter of the rectangle, not area. First find the perimeter, then we are going to find its area also. So length of one side be A, the length of other side be B, and therefore we can write the perimeter is equal to 2 into A plus B. Now here there is addition of two quantities A and B. Now we are going to find how to estimate the error when there is a combination of two quantities. Like if Z is the given function, that is equal to sum of two quantities, it may be subtraction of two quantities, it may be multiplication also. Like to find the area of a rectangle, if Z, then that is equal to A multiplied by B, or if it is division of two quantities. Let us first start with the addition and subtraction of two physical quantities. Let us consider that the given function Z is the sum of two physical quantities A and B. Now we are going to measure A, we are going to measure B, and let us add them to find Z. Now while measuring A and B, we are bound to make certain errors. Now let us consider that delta A plus or minus delta A is the error in the measurement of A, and plus or minus delta B is error in the measurement of B. So now the new reading, or the reading of the quantity Z, will be given as Z plus or minus delta Z, where delta Z is the error in the value of Z, is equal to A plus or minus delta A plus B plus or minus delta B. Therefore we can write Z plus or minus delta Z is equal to A plus B. Let us write them together. Then plus or minus delta A plus or minus delta B. Now this Z on left hand side will be cancelled with A plus B on right hand side, because Z is equal to A plus B. And so finally we get error in the measurement of Z, which is delta Z is the sum of errors in the measurement of A and error in the measurement of B. So we get delta Z is equal to plus or minus delta A plus or minus delta B. Now over here in the measurement of Z, if delta Z is the error, then there are four possibilities for delta Z. Now which four possibilities are these? Now let us consider the four possibilities. See, possibility number 1, delta Z is equal to, take positive values of both delta A as well as delta B. So delta Z equal to delta A plus delta B. This is possibility number 1. Possibility number 2, delta Z is equal to, let A be positive, delta A and B negative minus delta B. Possibility number 3, delta Z equal to minus delta A plus delta B. And possibility number 4 is delta Z equal to minus delta A minus delta B. Now out of all these possibilities, the greatest one is delta Z equal to delta A plus delta B, and therefore the reading is considered to be Z plus delta Z, where delta Z is equal to delta A plus delta B. So this is the error when the function is addition of two functions A and B. So if Z is equal to A plus B, then error in the reading of Z, delta Z, is considered to be delta A plus delta B. Same procedure applicable if the function is subtraction of two functions. If z is equal to a minus b, and let delta a be the error in the value of a and delta b be the error in the value of b, so that delta z is the error in the value of z, then we can write this as z plus or minus delta z is equal to a plus or minus delta a minus b plus or minus delta b, and therefore we get z plus or minus delta z is equal to a minus b plus or minus delta a plus or minus delta b. Now this z on left hand side will be cancelled with a minus b on the right hand side, and so we get plus or minus delta z is equal to plus or minus delta a plus or minus delta b. Now this expression is same as we got in case of z is equal to a plus b, and so we finally write delta z is equal to delta a plus delta b. So in case of z is addition or subtraction of two functions a and b, the absolute error in the value of z is the sum of absolute errors in the values of a and b, that is delta z equal to delta a plus delta b. Now if z is the product of two functions, z is equal to a into b, let us consider that delta a is the error in the value of a, delta b is the error in the value of b, so that delta z is the error in the value of z. So now we can write this as, therefore z plus or minus delta z is equal to a plus or minus delta a multiplied by b plus or minus delta b. Now let us perform one-to-one multiplication here. A multiplied by b, a multiplied by b, therefore z plus or minus delta z is equal to a into b ab. Next is a multiplied by delta b plus or minus a delta b. Next plus or minus delta a multiplied by b, that is plus or minus b delta a, and the last one delta a multiplied by delta b, so it is plus or minus delta a into delta b. Now z on left hand side will be cancelled with ab on right hand side because z is equal to ab, and also we can neglect delta a delta b. Now why we can neglect delta a delta b? Because the product of two small quantities is extremely small. Now these are the errors, so they are bound to be very small. Suppose delta a is 0.01, equally delta b also 0.01, then how much is 0.01 multiplied by 0.01? That is equal to 0.0001. Now as compared to 0.01, we can neglect 0.0001, and so we get finally, therefore delta z is equal to plus or minus a delta b plus or minus b delta a. Now similarly, as we had discussed in case of addition and subtraction, there are four possible cases here with this plus or minus and plus or minus. The greatest of them is a delta b plus b delta a. So this is considered to be the absolute error in the value of z, delta z equal to a delta b plus b delta a. Now let us divide both sides by z is equal to ab, and therefore on left hand side we get delta z divided by z is equal to a delta b divided by ab plus b delta a divided by ab. Now this a from numerator gets cancelled, b gets cancelled, and see we are left with what? We are left with delta z upon z on left hand side, that is equal to delta b upon b plus delta a upon a. So in case of product of two terms, we can write that relative error in z is equal to relative error, this is relative error in z, is equal to relative error in b plus relative error in a. Or you can write relative error in a first because a comes first as a part of convention. So relative error in z is equal to relative error in a plus relative error in b. Now from here we can find a percentage error also, and therefore multiply relative error with 100 and we get a percentage error, and so we get percentage error in z is equal to percentage error in a plus percentage error in b. Now if there is a division of two functions, z is equal to a upon b. Now for z is equal to a upon b also, we are going to apply same formula without change. That relative error in z equal to relative error in a plus relative error in b, and percentage error in z is equal to percentage error in a plus percentage error in b. So remember, these formulae are equally applicable for z is equal to a upon b and z is equal to a multiplied by b. Next, errors due to the power index of a measured quantity. So for example, if z is equal to a raised to n, let us take an example a raised to 3, then we can write this as z equal to a multiplied by a multiplied by a. Just now we have derived the formula for z is equal to a into b. If z is equal to a into b, then delta z is equal to, what is delta z is equal to? A delta b plus b delta a, right? And then we have derived the formula that relative error, that is delta z upon z is equal to delta a upon a plus delta b upon b. Now from this formula only we are going to modify the formula for a cube. See, it's a into b, right? Now over here it is a into a only. Instead of b, it's given a one more time. And so we can write this as delta z upon z is equal to delta a divided by a plus delta a divided by a plus delta a divided by a 3 times, because it is a raised to 3. I would have did this n times if it would have been n here. Z is equal to a raised to n, and therefore we get delta z divided by z equal to 3 times addition. So I can write that as 3 into delta a divided by a. So in general we can say that if z is equal to a raised to n, then delta z upon z is equal to n times delta a upon a. So this is the relative error for index, that is the exponential function. Now what if the exponent is negative? Now what do you mean by exponent is negative? That is z is equal to a raised to p upon b raised to q. So division of two numbers. So let us use the formula for division and straight away write this as delta z upon z equal to p times delta a upon a, that is the relative error in the value of a, plus q times delta b upon b. Now you may extend this to n number of quantities, like you can write this as c raised to r also. If it is c raised to r, then plus r times delta c divided by c. So this is the formula for relative error of combination. So we have seen relative error for combination, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponential function, that is index. Next topic is significant figures. Now we have studied in details mistakes, errors, methods to eliminate the errors, types of errors. Now why we are studying this all? In order to make our reading more accurate. Now what makes our reading accurate or inaccurate? Least count. Least count represents the accuracy of the given instrument. Now let us take an example of meter scale. Meter scale's least count is 0.1 centimeter. So this is the last reading that we can take using a meter scale. Okay. Now if you are going to take 3 readings using a meter scale, say for example, let the 3 readings be 10.2, 10.3 and 10.2 again. So we have measured a length as 10.2, 10.3 and 10.2 again. So what is the average? Average of these 3. So average value is equal to, so average reading is 10.2 plus 10.3 plus 10.2 divided by 3. That is equal to, now 10.2 plus 10.3, 30.7 it is. So 30.7 divided by 3. So 30.7 divided by 3. That is equal to 10.3 10 the 30, 0.3 to the 6. The next one is left, 3 3 the 9. So 10.23 centimeter. Now while taking the reading 10.23, now have a look at this diagram. This is 1 millimeter. One division stands for 1 millimeter, right? 10.2, 0.2, that 0.2 is 2 millimeter. This is 2 millimeter. So we can take a reading of 2 millimeter. I'll zoom it little bit to make it more clear. See, when we say 2 millimeter, the line is somewhere over here. See, now I'm showing you 2 millimeter. Now this is 1 millimeter. See this is 1 millimeter. So 1 millimeter. Next is 2 millimeter. Now the line is just past 2 millimeter, but we don't know where it is. Where it is 2.1, 2.0, 2.3. But since it has not crossed 3, we are going to write this as 2 millimeter only. Right? So now the average that we got is 10.23 centimeter. Now, as I have explained you just now, we are very certain about this 10 centimeter. We are very certain about 10 centimeter, but we are not certain about 2 and 3. So the certain number of figures are these. 1 and 0 are certain figures, and we are uncertain about 2 and 3. Like I explained just now, that about 2 we are not sure whether the line is exactly at 2 or just past 2. Now just past 2 where? At 3, 0.03, 0.04, 0.05 we don't know. So the significant figure is defined as number of certain figures and next one uncertain figure. So for us the significant figures are 1, 0 and 2. So how many significant figures are there? 3 figures are significant over here. Okay, so remember always how to find a number of significant figures. Number of certain figures plus one uncertain figure. Okay. Now the rules for determining significant figures for the given measurement. Rule number 1. All the non-zero digits. Remember, all the non-zero digits are significant. Let us have an example. If the volume of an object is given as 178.43 centimeter cube, then these are all non-zero digits: 1, 7, 8, 4 and 3. So there are 5 significant digits: 1, 7, 8, 4, 3. Count the number of digits: 1, 7 second, 8 third, 4 fourth and 3 fifth. So there are 5 significant figures over here. Rule number 2. All the zeros, this is for zeros, all the zeros between two non-zero digits are significant. For example, mass is given as 165.02. Now this 0 is between 2 and 5, which are non-zero. So this 0 between two non-zero digits is also considered as a significant figure. So how many significant figures are there? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So there are 5 significant figures. If this mass would have been 160.02, then also these two zeros are considered as significant figures because they appear between two non-zero digits. And in that case also there would have been 5 significant figures. Rule number 3 is for the numbers which are less than 1. For numbers less than 1, like numbers 0 point anything. So for numbers less than 1, the zeros to the right of the decimal point and to the left of the first non-zero digit are not significant. Okay, now let us consider this number over here. Now consider this number 0.001405. Now this number is less than 1. So this is the decimal point over here. To the right of the decimal and 1 is first non-zero. To the left of 1 there are 2 zeros. These zeros are non-significant. So how many significant figures are there? 1, 2, 3 and 4. So 4 significant figures are there over here. So this is the rule to assign significant figures for numbers less than 1. Okay, let us repeat it one more time. It's a bit important. So to the right of the decimal point, so this is the decimal point to the right of this, and 1 the first non-zero digit to the left of this. All zeros are insignificant, or say not significant. Don't say insignificant, say not significant. And therefore the number of significant figures are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Rule number 4. The zeros on the right hand side of the last non-zero number are significant. So for example, if it is written like 1.500, then these zeros are also significant over here. So the number of significant figures here are 4. There are 4 significant figures. But for this rule to be valid, the number should always be written with a decimal point. The decimal point is very important over here. So for example, if you are writing a number like 0.001500, so according to the rule, the number of zeros to the right of decimal and to the left of first non-zero are insignificant, or sorry, non-significant. So these are not significant, but these zeros are significant. So in this case also there are 4 significant figures. Now to the contrary of this, if you are not using a decimal point and writing a number like 1500, then this 0 over here, these 2 0 over here are not significant. These are not significant. And the only significant figures here are 1 and 5. So only 2 significant figures are there. If you are writing 15200, then in this case also, if this is the reading, say length 15200 centimeter, these two zeros are not significant and only these three figures are significant, 1, 5 and 2. So there are 3 significant figures over here. Now to avoid the confusion between this number less than 1 and number greater than 1, the number should be expressed in a scientific notation called as order of magnitude. A given number should always be expressed as a into 10 raised to n, where 0.5 is less than or equal to a less than 5. So express the given number as a product of a and a power of 10, where a is the number between 0.5 to 5. If a number is expressed like this is called the order of magnitude, and then it becomes very easy to find the number of significant figures. For example, consider the value of universal constant of gravitation G equal to 6.67 into 10 raised to minus 11 SI unit. Now if you want to express this in terms of order of magnitude, express that as a number between 0.5 to 5. Now is this between 0.5 to 5, 6.67? It is greater than 0.5 and also greater than 5. So number should be less than 5. Now to make it less than 5, let us write this as 0.667 multiplied by. Now 0.667 multiplied by. So we have taken 10 from this. So 10 into 10 raised to minus 11 will be 10 raised to minus 10 SI unit, of course. So now 0.667 is between 0.5 to 5, and so we can write this as, or we can call this as order of magnitude form for capital G, that is universal constant of gravitation. This power of 10 over here is called as its order of magnitude. So the order of magnitude of G is equal to minus 10 is the order of magnitude, and number of significant figures are equal to 3, 6, 6, 7. So 3 significant figures are there and the order of magnitude is minus 10. Let us consider one more example. Is equal to 6400 kilometer. Is equal to 6400 kilometer. Now we can write that as 6.4 into 10 raised to 3. Now decimal has been shifted 3 positions. See, 1, 2, 3 positions has been shifted towards left. So power will become positive by those many numbers, and therefore 6.4 into 10 raised to 3 kilometer, convert kilometer to meter. So multiply by 10 raised to 3 meter. So that is equal to 6.4 into 10 raised to 6 meter. Now this we have converted into SI unit. Now let us write in the form of order of magnitude. For order of magnitude, we need this number between 0.5 to 5, but this is greater than 5, 6.4. So let us write this as 0.64 into, now shift 10 to 10 raised to 6, it would be 10 raised to 7 meter. So now it is between 0.5 to 5. So we can say that order of magnitude is equal to 7 and number of significant figure is equal to 2. 6 and 4 are the 2 significant figures over here.